Hi, this is DT Grant in the Practice Podcast, the place where we dive deep into the hidden world of healers. Today, I'll be interviewing Two Bears again. I had a few more questions I wanted to ask her, and my daughter had a couple as well. For those who didn't hear my first interview, Two Bears is a Native American Choctaw seer, psychic, and healer who currently lives in California.
Take me to that other place. You make me feel in another way. I've tried to find
And now, welcome Two Bears.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. There
Okay.
you are.
All right. Thank you so much. People love you.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you want to do this?
We can go into the interview, and Ela had some things to ask you, if that's okay.
It all works for me.
Okay. One question I had that I didn't write down. Where are you from? I saw Choctaw are from southeastern U.S.
Yeah, we are Mississippi, originally Alabama. And my family got relocated in 1832 from their homeland into what's now Oklahoma. So that's where I grew up. That's where
Okay.
I went to school.
And now my daughter Ela will ask a couple of questions.
Sort of.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Ela. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Have you ever told somebody that something was going to happen and they tried to make it not happen? Then would your prediction change or just you could be wrong?
Well, it's not likely that I'm wrong. I hate to say it that way, but I think in my work and all the people that I've worked with, if I tell them I see this thing is going to happen to you, I always preference it that it's a warning. I tell you today and I see it's going to happen next week, you have time to change your path. Like if you're driving down the street, you can turn left instead of right. You get a choice. You have time. If it's something really bad, like somebody in their life might be injured in a car accident or something like that they have no control over, how they react by them knowing ahead of time, they're prepared to react. They're prepared to help. They get information that can guide them through it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You're saying that there's things we can't avoid?
There's some things that you can't avoid, but you can prepare yourself for them.
Okay.
Yeah, you can avoid things. If you know it's coming, you can change your plans. Like if you had planned to go on a picnic and I see it's going to rain all day, then you go to the movies instead. You do something different. And that's what I think my job is, to give you information that can help you make decisions in the future. And I want you to understand that there's always two faces. Two faces. There's a dark face and a light face to every situation. So you want to always keep your mind on looking toward the light face, but always be aware that there is some darkness, because we live in a world of duality. So we live in a world of opposites, and our choices, what we decide to do in our minds, is always there. And sometimes the darkness just happens. Sometimes it takes over, and we have to be really strong in those times. You want to get to know who you are and what's inside you and what you love about yourself, because that's your strength. So when the dark side or the shadow side comes along, you have the ability and the capability to make a good decision. But you heard all of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have more questions you want to ask?
Where did you get your name from?
Oh, I don't remember what year it was, back in the 1980s. I was participating in an intertribal gathering. It was called an earth healing ceremony. And there were about 300 or 400 people there. And I was the fire tender, because anytime you have a big ceremony, there's always a fire. And there was a van, an old, like, hippie van, pulled up alongside of where we were in camp. And this really tall native man from Puerto Rico, he came walking over to where the fire was. And a fire is always a sacred part of the ceremonies. You keep the surroundings of it really quiet and clean. And he sat down on a stump near my fire. And then when the men came out of the ceremonial lodge, he stood up when they came out. And he happened to know those people, but he didn't speak English. His name was Grandfather Ephraim, and he's long time since passed away. He was an older man. And he began to talk to me in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, so this was not fun. I had no idea what he was saying. So one of my friends heard this going on and came up, who does speak Spanish, and she began to interpret for me. And he told me that he knew my grandfather and that my name was Two Bears. And I'm going, no, I think you got the wrong person. You got the wrong. But then he started to tell me things about my grandfather that were true. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I better listen to this guy. Well, so he called me Two Bears at that gathering. I think it was 1985, something like that. And then even before the next day, it was that night and the next day, people started calling me Two Bears. So I've been called that ever since then. I don't mind it at all. So what he described, Grandfather Ephraim, is he described that I have a little bear that lives here in front of me, kind of like a cub, that's very playful and likes to laugh. He lives right here in front of me. And then I have this really big grizzly bear that stands behind me and gives me a lot of strength. And they're both very helpful to me. Now, in my tradition, where I come from, the Cherokee Choctaw tradition, we always believed that bears were healers. That bears are our friend, and they're healers. So there was an epidemic that happened in the Indian nations a long time ago, around the 1600s or so, and a lot of people were dying. And the bears came into our tribal, in our village, and they made some soup, the bears. They made soup on our fire, kept our fire going. They went around to every person in the tribe everybody was sick, and they fed them this soup, and they helped them get well, and we all got well from that. So I always knew that I had bear energy before that time. I always knew I had it because it was kind of in my family, but I didn't want to be really identified with Two Bears, but I am. And here I am, an old woman now, and my Two Bears is still definitely a powerful thing with me.
Can you choose who you want to tell their future?
Absolutely. Like sometimes, if I'm in the grocery store, then I'll get a little tap on my shoulder, and a voice will come in my ears and tell this person it's going to be okay. One time there was a woman in the grocery store, and she was just buying her groceries, minding her own business, and they told me to tell her that her son was okay and not to worry about him. Well, I didn't know this woman. I didn't know anything about her son, and so I stopped shopping in front of this woman, and I said, I have a message for you. I don't do this often, I told her. I said, but I want you to know that your son is going to be okay, and you cannot worry about him. It's okay. He's going to be all right. He's going to contact you, and it's going to be all right. And she started crying. And so I never saw that woman again. I don't know what happened, So I gave her the message. So yes. And I also, there are people sometimes that I don't want to talk to. That I get kind of feelings that they're going to, do something they shouldn't do. And I don't want to be in that dark energy. So when that happens, I don't give them an appointment.
Just a note, Hila's wrapping up her questions now.
I'll tell you, you're just lovely and quite a pleasure to talk to. And I'm so excited that I got to meet you today.
Thank you.
So that's Hila.
She's quite magical.
She is. So I have a few more questions.
I see that.
So kind of in line with what you were talking about with Hila's question, what do you think about the idea of destiny versus free will? And you did say it wasn't everyone's destiny to be able to do this kind of work, so I imagine you believe in destiny. Do you believe we have free will to change things, or is our path predetermined?
Oh, that's a really complicated question. I think we have a path from the time we were first born. I think there are many ways to find out what that path is. I also think we make choices that get us off the path. Like, example would be the relationship with that guy you're talking about that still haunts you. There was a destiny that the two of you had together, and so that haunts you. It's like something you need to resolve within yourself. So, but you're still on your path. You're still on your path. So
are you saying I wasn't on my path with that relationship?
Yes, you were on that path.
I was on my path.
Yeah. And what you saw and what you experienced you made some wise decision to not continue with that relationship. And then you began a new path, which I think we began over and over and over again. You began new paths. The whole thing with destiny is predetermined. I believe that. And I believe that we can make decisions that take us away from that destiny. But destiny's always waiting. And then we make a decision to go back.
This is kind of a heavy question because I've always wondered about the idea of almost spiritual suicide or choosing the wrong path that's not your destiny because maybe you don't want your destiny, and if you get so far off of it, it's like you can't get back on. And does that lead to like a sort of spiritual suicide or maybe even death because you're so far off your path you have to, I don't know if you believe in past lives or future lives, and so you have to start over because you're so far off you can't get back on your path. But I've always wondered with some people, like even my father, I know he didn't like his job and he wanted to do something else. And I think the pressure and worry of supporting the kids, I sometimes wonder, I know he wasn't happy in what he was doing. We were part of his happiness, having children, but he was working so much and hated his job so much that I sometimes wonder if you hate life so much that you might die. I understand that this is a topic that might bring many people reeling. My father died suddenly of a heart attack at 41, and his brother, who is 17 years younger, received a letter from him 2 weeks before he died. And in that letter, he talked about how he really wasn't happy with his work and wanted to change his job. He had hopes of starting a store with my other uncle. And my uncle told me when he received that letter, and then my dad died 2 weeks later, he swore to never choose something that didn't fulfill him. And he left his job with an insurance company and started doing his own thing and has stuck to that his whole life. But I wonder if we get warning signs, and those warning signs might present with health issues. My father, unfortunately, had some bad genetics, so he was more predisposed to certain things like heart disease. Unfortunately, he didn't get much of a warning. although he might have had more warning than I'm aware of because I was only 6 years old. A few months before he died, he was running in a road race, and he passed out about halfway through and broke his nose. He got up and finished the race, and after the race they looked into his broken nose, but no one ever questioned why he passed out. Back when my father died, he would get up at about 4 a.m. to exercise and then go to work, and he wouldn't come home till about 10 at night. Looking at old photos of him, I don't think I've ever seen anyone more fit than my father, but he was incredibly stressed out, and he loved sugar. And back then, they were not releasing data about the harms of sugar, but more fat. Because of my father, I always wondered what role sugar played in heart disease, but until early 2000, that data was hidden. And it was released in early 2000 that the Sugar Research Foundation had paid about $6,500, which is the equivalent of $50,000 today, to some researchers to emphasize issues with saturated fats on the heart rather than sugar. I always wondered how many lives would have been saved if they had actually released that data about the harms of sugar. Now let's return to this discussion about the idea of spiritual suicide. I worry that this idea might bring other people to blame themselves or others for health problems or death or whatever it might be. I do want to point out, I am not suggesting that every case of sickness or death is what I'm talking about. Some people just get sick, and some people die because of health issues. And there is nothing behind that. One time when I was doing a rotation in medical school, this one doctor came and taught us some really valuable lessons. One thing he taught us was we have to be careful what we teach our patients. Say they have something like diabetes or prediabetes, and we teach them how to change their diet and lifestyle to help their health. So they change things and they lose weight, and their prediabetes or diabetes gets better or goes away. But then they slip, which we all slip. We can't always do it perfectly all of the time. And not only do we feel bad physically because we're not taking care of ourselves, but then we also carry guilt and blame ourselves for how we feel because now we know we have control to make it different. So in the same way, we have to be really careful to not blame ourselves for whatever happens to ourselves or others, and know that we can't always perfectly follow our path and our destiny, and that sometimes we will veer off of it, and that we need to have forgiveness for ourselves and others and just do our best, but know that we won't always do it perfectly. So regarding this idea of spiritual suicide, I don't know if it's true, but it definitely has crossed my mind. And now back to my conversation with two bears.
I've never heard it phrased that way. That's really sad. That's a sad story. And I do believe that that's possible, that you get stray off your path. I think that's when you go to a healer or a shaman or a medicine person who can help you get back on your path. Sandra Ingerman, have you heard of her?
No.
Sandra Ingerman, Ingerman. She wrote a book several years ago called The Soul Retrieval, because I think we sell ourselves out sometimes. We sell our souls. I think we give our souls away. I think other people come and take parts of our soul. I will always describe the soul as a pie. So you take this fresh pie out of the oven, and it's it's smelling so good, and it's all together in one thing, and then you start to cut slices out of it. Well, that's kind of what happens to the soul. You cut slices and you give it to this person, and another person comes along and just takes a piece, So, and that's when you need to get back in alignment with your truth. And as for your father, I think if he would have understood that, or even felt like that was a possibility, he could have got back in alignment with his truth. However, unhappiness, because you mentioned how unhappy he was. Unhappiness does not always mean that you're in the wrong place.
Right.
Unhappiness, the minute we're born, we get sabotaged. The first time they cut the umbilical cord, we begin to get sabotaged by what other people's expectations are of who we are, what other people want us to be. And of course, we all want to please our mothers, so we want to do what she wants us to do. So we're sabotaged. And in that sabotage, there's a forgetfulness that happens. You forget who you came in as. Now, the nice thing about you, I'm really grateful I got to meet your daughter today. The nice thing about you is that little girl has not been sabotaged. That little girl knows who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And all our children and grandchildren, they all deserve to know that. They all deserve to be peacefully themselves.
I just know from me living my life, at a certain point in med school, something shifted where I wasn't doing what I wanted anymore. And I felt like, I call them my fairies. They disappeared. And I had no guidance. And I made a lot of decisions that maybe I wouldn't have made if I was connected. But I felt almost dead to that spirit world.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that happens to a lot of women. Do you know Julia Cameron's work?
No.
Oh. Julia Cameron. She's a writer. And she's written several, I think about 9 or 10 of these little books. Her work and what she does is she teaches a dedication and a discipline to write 3 pages every day. She calls them the morning pages.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. A lot of people find their way back by doing some similar art. And a lot of times life, like with your father, interferes with that destiny. So was that helpful to you?
Mm-hmm. So this is a question that just came up. So I sometimes feel like I experience things intuitively, but then I have anxiety also. And I don't know sometimes if something is telling me not to do something because of anxiety or because of intuition. How would I best know if it's my spirit guides trying to tell me or if it's my anxiety? Like if I got on a plane and I'm nervous, it doesn't feel right. And sometimes I think, does this mean something bad's going to happen? Or is it just me stressing out? And I don't know what to do. And sometimes maybe I'm not supposed to get on the plane, but nothing really bad happens. It just ends up being a bad trip. But I worry about distinguishing them. And I'm thinking about the last time we spoke and you said, you need to work on your spiritual practice. And that's what I'm guessing you're going to tell me to do.
Oh, I wasn't going to tell you to do that, but that's a good answer.
Well, what were you going to tell me?
Because I read this question before, you sent me your list of questions. I tell you, you're really good at this. I like that. Intuition is totally separate from anxiety. Intuition is matter of fact. There would have been a voice or some recollection inside you that says, don't get on that plane. And anxiety, that's a little different. That's your emotional attachment to something. Okay?
Uh-huh.
So if you can label it anxiety, it's not intuition.
Okay. I was supposed to go to Peru, and I think back to how we spoke, and you didn't say anything to me, but I thought, she's not really thinking this is going to happen. I could tell. And it didn't. I was going to see a shaman in Peru. I got everything ready, but I wasn't really excited to go. So 2 days before I said to the shaman, should I come? He's like, yeah, now's good. Then I'm still like, I don't really know about this. I go to the airport. I go to security. I give them my passport. I look down at my phone to give them the boarding pass, and it says, your flight is canceled. And I'm like, there you go. I went home, and I didn't go. And I worked on editing instead, which was great. But I just thought, okay, there was no choice in that. There are times I get on the plane, and it's often a plane, and I think, oh no, I don't want to leave my kids. And I get nervous, and that's anxiety, I'm sure.
That's anxiety. That's such a great story. Nope, you're not going.
Yeah.
Plane's canceled.
So,
Great
yeah.
story.
So you suggested shamanic journeying instead of meditation to help as a better form of spiritual practice. And so I talked to a shaman recently about that. So I asked her a little bit about the ways we access our spirit guides. And it's interesting because I've always wanted to see my spirit guides or hear them. She said, no, we may not see them, we may not hear them. But I think for me, because I'm an osteopath and I feel things, that maybe for me it's just a feeling. But is that how it is for you? Or if I practice more, am I going to see them or am I going to hear them? But I don't practice like you do.
I still do hours.
Yes.
And it takes that in today's world. I would not be able to survive. I would not be able to go put gas in my car. I'd be a basket case if I didn't have my spiritual practice. And I know that in that practice, I also put a lot of shields around me. And there's a peacefulness in my practice that comes. So your question was, do I help people do journeys? The answer to that is yes, but it's usually in person. I know, too, that Sandra Ingerman also helps people do journey work. So I would look her up. She's been around a long time. So I know that she's honest and she's truthful. So I can highly recommend her. The difference between meditation and the shaman's journey. Meditation is you're going inside of yourself, your beingness, and you're attaining moments of quiet. You're seeking silence. You're seeking that your mind will shut up. And then Thich Nhat Hanh, he always did walking meditations. Okay, so there's all these different kinds of meditations. A shaman's journey, there are three worlds. We as human beings, we live in these three worlds consistently, a lot of times without knowing. And in the shaman's journey, they call the first world is called the underworld. It's inside the Mother Earth. And you actually prepare yourself to go either into a cave or you sit by a tree stump and go down inside the tree roots. You can use drumming. You can use other kinds of music to get you there. The people that I've assisted on their journeys, most of them have never seen their spirits, never knew what they were at all, and almost immediately it happens for them.
Okay. I've always been drawn to herons.
Me too.
Yeah.
They're kind of prehistoric.
They are.
I love that.
And then I started thinking about the animals in the different directions. And I've always really loved delicate snakes.
I love snake people. They're very transformative. They're flexible. They let go of the past really easily.
Yeah, I don't know if that's me.
Some people work for it.
Maybe not. So at this point, I just have one more question. Since I'm calling this the Practice Podcast, I'm curious how you would describe your practice, your healing practice, spiritual practice, whatever that is for you.
You know, I've been doing this a very, very long time. It kind of started by accident that I hung out my shingle. People would ask me questions and I would just give them the answer. I don't know where the answer came from. You know, I started very young praying. Sometimes now I call it intention. But what I was taught as a young child was to take a pinch of tobacco and hold it up to the sun and to say, "Good morning, grandfather. Thank you for coming," to the sun. And to take that little tobacco and drop it on the grandmother earth and then say thanks to her and to say to my grandmother earth, you know, "Thank you for your heartbeat. It comes up through my feet and keeps me rooted and grounded on this planet." You see, as well as I talk to the moon every day. Those two little things that I learned as a child, that's like the beginning of my practice every day. And then I pray for like all my neighbors and all my kids and all my grandkids and friends and people who've asked me to pray for them. I also was a sun dancer for 8 years, which is a Lakota ceremony that I participated in. And I always, when they would ask me, "Why are you dancing?" You had to have a reason. I would also say I'm dancing for the people. And I really believe that my dedication to helping others on their journey is how I got on this road. As I've learned things about this path and I've seen things go wrong and I've felt things where other people tried to harm me, I realized, oh, this is something I have to take seriously. So that's when I started to develop a bigger practice. I use smoke quite a bit of the time, I smudge in smoke, and I use that a lot. I use feathers, you can see, and I do drum work. And then I generally close my eyes in the drum work, because in the drum, it vibrates with my heartbeat, and the drum then gives me energy, and I always have a vision when I'm using my drum. So my practice includes that. Okay, did I answer that question?
Yes. I think so.
It was wonderful to see you again.
You too. Thank you for everything.
See you next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
This concludes the 6th interview of the Practice Podcast. I'd love to thank Two Bears again for joining us today and answering these deep and somewhat challenging questions. I'm also really grateful to hear the details of the kind of practice that she does. Once again, I'd love to thank the band Modera Kayand for letting me use their amazing song, To Find You. This is D.T. Grant wishing you a magical and inspiring journey towards health. Thanks for listening.